You're listening to the default audio track, which includes instructional narrative. To turn this track off, simply press the audio button on your DVD remote to listen to music. Press it again to just listen to the sounds of the ride.
That's what I'm hoping.
Welcome everybody to the tour to Steamboat. We're just north of Steamboat, about 3 miles. Taking an early start. We're actually in front of the ride. The group is coming up behind us, and you'll get to see them often as we get past on the climb. And today I have a special guest. His name is Cody, and Tim has quite a history, cycling history, and one of his biggest accomplishments was, at least to me, is his 3,000-mile ride across the country, starting in Oceanside, California, and arriving into New Jersey about, how many days was that, Tim?
28 days later.
28 days. So Tim is going to talk a little bit to us about his training techniques, as well as some of his experiences on this adventure that he went on. And then I'll try to interject every once in a while with things that we should be doing while we're riding. Right now we should be in a nice easy gear, spinning at an easy cadence, and this is just a warm-up to the climb that's about to come. We'll be slowly warming up our legs and getting our heart rate up to about 75%. You'll notice on the dashboard we have 2 graphs at the bottom. The upper graph is the hill profile, and the lower graph is our effort. There's a solid black line going between both graphs, and at the moment it's too cold to register any heart rate. So, and you'll notice that all of a sudden there's a big jump into the yellow, and that's right about 75% max. So we're going to slowly warm up to about that effort. So Tim is an avid cyclist. He races Cat 3. Is that yes? Yes. And lives here in Denver. And married. What team do you ride with, Tim?
I'm currently riding with Colorado Bike Law.
Okay. And what I mean, is that the sponsor, or?
Colorado Bike Law is the primary sponsor, and the primary sponsor represents cyclists that have been injured in accidents by cars and other faults, not their own.
Wow. How long have you been riding with them?
I've been with Colorado Bike Law for just a little over 5 years now.
Do they compete locally, or what type of racing do they do?
They currently primarily ride in races around Colorado. There are a few racers that have gone over to Europe and do other rides around the country, but primarily Colorado.
Okay. And when you started with them for about 5 years ago, how long have you been cycling? Actually, I know this answer. Tim and I actually are old high school friends. We live reunited after about 20 years.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming about 20 years you're cycling.
I actively cycled when I was in high school and college and military. I kind of got away from it, but picked it up again when I was about 32.
Okay. I actually remember Tim and I were the only 2 people, I think, in high school who rode bikes. and I had a race coming up, and I think you challenged me that you were going to kick my ass. And you should have shown up, because you would have. I cramped up, and after about 3 miles, I was so nervous. And it's the end of my race. But I think I won the sprint against when the women came in behind me. It was a little. Yeah, that was my first race.
What race was that?
Oh God, I don't remember. That was just a civilian race. It's out in Lakewood, and it was a crit. It went like Kipling to Morrison Road. Is that right? No, Wadsworth, Morrison Road, Kipling, and then I think down Arapahoe or something, or Nevada. I can't remember. It was about a 3-mile lap, and there was maybe 30 people at the start. And I had on my disco clothes. The tire back then wasn't really very cool.
It's not really cool now, is it?
Not much. Well, it has that, and it's also like 5 times as expensive. Crazy. I was thinking of writing a journal about where you can find clothing that's like realistically priced. So, you've been cycling for a long time. Tell me, what's your favorite thing about the sport?
My favorite thing about cycling is being able to grab your bike, open the front door, and just go. And it doesn't matter where you're going, but it's just nice to be able to leave from your house, not to have to drive somewhere, get all ready to go do something, put the bike in the car, drive it off somewhere, but just being able to leave from your house and to see the world at 18 to 20 miles an hour is a pretty special thing, because you're going somewhere fast enough to where you feel like you're getting somewhere, but you're going slow enough to where you don't miss anything.
Stop and smell the roses.
Yeah, most definitely. And that has to be one of my most favorite things about cycling.
I think that's what definitely gets people started into the sport, is just realizing how beautiful a place they live. I think a lot of people don't really realize how different things are when they're driving to work every day instead of riding or running or something like that. Let's turn on some air. So can you tell me something about cycling that you don't like?
I would have to say the thing that, I know there's not much, but the thing I dislike about cycling is you pretty much, you have to stick with it. Because even if, you can ride a couple days a week and still not lose your form or anything like that, but you take a couple weeks off or 3 weeks off, your bottom starts to hurt again, and
yep.
You've got to work everything back into the shape again.
Yeah, you feel guilty when you're sick, and it takes a couple weeks to get back on the bike, and then you feel like you've lost everything that you've accomplished.
But the trick is just to do it a couple times a week, and you'll keep that form.
Yeah. I think for me, it's the misunderstanding that people have that I don't like. It's the misunderstanding of other people who don't actively cycle, who make judgment calls based on what they see on the road instead of getting out there and doing the sport themselves. But that's a conversation for another day. So, you've been racing for what, I guess, well, you've been racing with your team for 5 years. How long have you been racing?
5 years.
Okay. What's your best event? Type of event? Crit, climbs, what?
I'd say my best event's probably time trials, but it's kind of a...
Is it really?
It's almost like a non-racing thing, but time trials seem to be one of my better events. And I would say second would be road races, but time trials seem to be something I'm suited for.
Huh. See, yeah, that's not mine.
I think the thing that draws me to time trialing is it's just you against the clock, and it's a total self-motivating thing.
Mm-hmm.
And how to keep pushing yourself just that much harder to get there. It's a self-motivating aspect of it, where you're not actually chasing someone down, except you're just solo competing.
So you like pushing yourself against yourself.
Yeah.
That's evident by your 3,000-mile ride. And so, then what's your worst event?
Believe it or not, I'd say my worst events are climbing races.
Really?
And that's why I've spent the last 2 years, or last year and plus, focusing on nothing but climbing.
Have you seen changes?
I've seen amazing improvement, but a lot of it is, the sad fact about cycling is it's a gravity sport.
Yeah.
And if you want to get better, you can either spend a lot of money on light equipment or take a little bit off your backside by not eating that
right
extra piece of cake or
beer
or cookies or ice cream.
Guilty.
And we're all guilty of that. But my biggest thing is, like when I started out, getting back into cycling again, I was up around, believe it or not, 202 pounds.
Wow.
And now, knock on wood, I'm back down to 156. And
wow.
That in itself helps you become a better climber. And the fact that if you want to be good at climbing, you got to climb.
Absolutely.
That's not you got to go out and do it.
I didn't realize you lost so much weight.
Yeah.
Right on. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your ride that you did, the charity that it was for, and who you were helping. So let me just introduce the ride here real quick. You organized a cross-country bike trip that left from Oceanside, California on May 27th, 2007. Then you traveled east about a little over 3,000 miles, ended the ride in Ocean City, New Jersey on June 26, 2007. 30 days, 100 miles, or about 100 miles a day, in order to raise money for, and tell me if I'm pronouncing this right, the Amyotrophic Lateral Sclerosis Association.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
So, not only did Tim organize the event to raise money, but he wrote it as well. You can see the heart rate. 74%, 75. We're in zone 2, just still a nice warm-up. Went up a little hill, and now we're coming back down. And you can see right in front of us the mountains, and off to the left there. And that's what we're climbing over today. So Tim, what made you realize that this type of event was, or this ride was something you wanted to do?
Well, believe it or not, I just finished watching the Tour de France in 2006, and an interview with Lance Armstrong and I think Leno or something like that, where he talked about how racing in the Tour de France, which is a month-long race, how racing that just changes you mentally, physically, everything. Doing that for a month just makes you a different person. And I thought that was quite a profound statement. I don't know, in my warped mind, I thought that was kind of interesting. And then I had a close friend of mine. His father passed away from ALS, also commonly known as Lou Gehrig's disease. And just a brief bit about Lou Gehrig's is it affects your nervous system and your muscular system to where you can't tell your muscles to do things anymore. So walking, you can't do that anymore. And there's no cure from this disease, and it just slowly comes on, and sooner or later the reactions stop you from breathing and other things like that, and you just don't have any control over it. You know you want to make stuff do it, but you can't. And when he passed away from that, I was trying to figure out a way to raise money for this terrible thing. And I thought about doing a local century or some sort of thing like that. And that to me just didn't seem like it was going to raise enough money. So I was somehow stumbled across the Ram Ride, which for those who don't know is a race across America. And I got the idea from that. And Lance and my friend's father passing away. And I thought that'd be the easiest way to raise a fair amount of money and do something challenging enough to warrant people donating.
And sponsors, too.
Sponsors.
You haven't noticed we're on the hill. We're in the big ring up front. We're going to grind up this grade. It's between about 7 to 10% the whole way up. We're in a big ring up front, 7 in the back. Resistance about a 7 out of 10. Should be feeling your legs, and your heart rate should start slowly raising. We're going to keep this level of effort until we hit about 87, 88% of our max. And then we're going to just hold it there for a really long time. To keep this ride realistic, if Tim were riding with me, he wouldn't be out of breath, and I would.
I doubt that climbing's tough for anybody.
Oh, shoot. Yeah, well, depending on how fast you're going up it.
The one thing about climbing is when you start out as a beginner, it's just painful. But it gets easier the more you do it. You just gotta keep trying it.
That's actually one of the questions I had for you. Is how would you prepare for a climbing event like this if you're a beginner? What techniques or what training advice would you give to somebody who's only maybe been riding a year, has never done a century, you know?
I would if it was me, because I did kind of the same thing when I started out. I got into cycling and wanted to do a century, so I rode. And every weekend I try to increase it. And, you know, I finally did the century. If I had to go back and tell somebody knew what to do, I start off and try to do an extra 10 miles a week. And once you get to 40 or 50, that's pretty easy.
You're in the zone to do a long distance ride.
Yeah. And you know, after riding long enough, that on any given day you can usually do twice of what you're training for. It wouldn't feel comfortable or great, but going 60, 70, 80, 90 made it a lot more difficult to get to 100. I would say find a century and start out early and just stay after it. Don't wait a month before or 2 weeks to ride and start trying to get there. Now don't get me wrong, you can do that and I've seen numerous people do it, but they're not really enjoying it when they're done.
Right.
So if you want to enjoy the first century, I would say start training early.
It's like we did Elephant Rock together. It's the same advice I gave earlier. It's always good to hear it reconfirmed.
And it's like, it's not rocket science stuff. You got to give your body time to adapt. And 100 miles isn't easy.
Oh no.
20, 40, 50 is not easy if it's all brand new.
So it sounds like what you're recommending is for a climbing event is to do basically base mile training for a climbing event. Climbs, distance.
Start off slow, build the miles up, start throwing in a climb a couple times or once a week, 2 times a week, and just get used to it. It's kind of like that old adage they told you in school, study on how you're going to take the test.
Right.
So do the same thing on the bike.
So, I mean, you said that the climbing racing events are your weakness as far as racing goes. How would you, let me ask you this, when you're training to climb for a racing event versus just like a social ride like this, how would you change your training strategy for a race?
With a century ride, unless you're trying to beat a personal best or something, it's basically, in my opinion, a fun ride. And I would treat that as such. And to train for 100 miles for a fun ride, you don't really have to put yourself underneath the gun a lot. You just steady pace and get it done. As far as racing goes, you do the miles, but you also throw in a lot of intervals. And intervals, because if you always go out and ride at, say, X, and you never do anything except ride at X, you're never going to get better than X. But if you ride higher and harder and lower and upper and you cover a whole gamut, you improve more, so then you can get to Y and Z.
Well, what's an interval to you?
Well, for instance, I'm trying to increase my functional lactic threshold level now, and an interval week would be 4 times 6 minutes, so 4 6-minute efforts with 2-minute recoveries.
So you're basically go on 100%.
Yeah.
And then recovering for a couple minutes.
Yep.
And then 100% again.
Yep. And then have a recovery day. And then the next day, bump it to 2 or 3 10-minute efforts with 2-minute recoveries. And that's all depending on how you want to perform. If you want to sprint better, you probably have shorter 20-second
right
intervals, and
where you're working on leg speed.
Yep.
Versus heart strength.
So, and if I was climbing for a race, I'd spend a fair amount of time climbing if it had climbing.
All right. When you made changes to become a better climber, how did your diet factor into it? How did you change your diet?
Well,
if you changed it.
For me, I'm kind of a strange individual. The whole calorie counting thing and trying to subtract how much I burn by working out, and the whole mathematical equation just made me irritated. Because I thought I'd be taking in less, and it wasn't working out. So I went to something that was just easier for me and kept me sane, was eat right, but just leave the table hungry. And that seemed a lot easier, and the weight came off.
Right.
But it's a lot of self-discipline.
Did you make dietary changes gradually, or did you just cut it off? Say salads and chicken breasts for the rest of my life. You know, how'd you do it?
No, I cut out the sweet, cut out the really high carb stuff. Now cycling, you need carbs, so that's a balancing act. It's like anything, and it's a give and take. But I just, you know, in this day and age, processed foods take a lot longer to digest and process versus the natural. The body has to do less work to consume that stuff. And so that's what I did. Just try to keep lean meats, vegetables, whole grain oats.
Our grade is fairly steep all the way up, and we're using a 52-42 ring combination for the entire climb. So our cadences are at about 70 RPM. And our heart rate still in the mid-80s. It's going to slowly raise a little higher, but cadence and resistance will be about the same. In this case, the mountain and my gearing is dictating the cadence. But if you're going to do a complete century, Tim, what cadence would you shoot for?
I personally like to stay between 85 and 95, but depending on how your bike is geared, and especially on this 12% grade we're on.
I don't know how accurate that is, but yeah.
You would need to have to be in a 52-32 or something to be able to maintain that high of a cadence. I don't know exactly what it is, but
right. So if somebody is, let's say, traveling from Ohio, they're going to do the triple bypass, which has 15,000 feet of climbing, or even this ride, which is around 9,000 feet. Phew, excuse me. What type of gearing might you recommend?
I personally, and I've geared my bike this way, but I got a 52-38 in the front and a 28-11 in the back. And to me, that's an all-around Colorado type of grouping,
right?
Because it'll allow you to do the steep climbs,
Right.
and everything in between.
Now I have on the camera bike that we're riding, it's a triple up front. And I have that granite gear I could drop into any time and make it much easier for everybody. But we're going to keep this resistance high because I really want you to feel your legs by the end of this workout. About halfway up the climb, which we're only a fourth of the way up now, your legs will probably be protesting a little bit.
They are already.
Constant demand. We're trying to make this climb really three-dimensional. Well, there's not a lot to talk about as far as effort and resistance, and I really wanted to learn a little bit more about your event that you did. What did you name it?
Ride for Strength.
Ride for Strength.
And if you want to go out and check the pictures and everything else, there's a site called www.rideforstrength.org, and a bunch of pictures of heart rate graphs and elevation, geeky stuff like that.
I saw the site. Impressive, a lot of photos, great stories of the ride. It seemed like a incredibly memorable journey.
It definitely was.
And I'll have the ride website posted on cycling videos online for this video. And so let me ask you, if somebody wanted to help or contribute, can they? And how could they?
The best way would be to go to the ALS Association and donate to one of those sites.
Okay.
There's the muscular dystrophy website that has an ALS subpart, I guess you'd call it. And then the ALS website itself.
Every 5 minutes on the video, a water bottle pops up, which is a reminder to drink, just in case you guys were wondering what that bottle meant. Most people forget to drink water when they're working, especially in the red, and it's actually sometimes feels uncomfortable. We have to discipline ourselves to drink on a regular basis, especially when we're climbing. And because of that, and we're sweating so much, it's important to keep our electrolyte balance constant. Do you bring anything to a ride like this to eat?
Oh yeah, definitely some sort of sports drink. 2 bottles, maybe 3 with one in your pocket. I particularly like the goo. Other people like the Cliff Bars and other things like that.
I don't like solids.
But one piece of advice that Coach gave me was don't do sports drinks and solids. It's a little bit too much calories for your body to absorb in a short period of time. You're best to do sports drinks and goo, or water and solids.
Agreed. So through this climb, let's focus on making sure we are taking on the right stuff with water. If you've got goo, use it. So when you started your 3,000 mile ride in Oceanside, California, can you tell me what the significance of that starting point was?
Well, I, being new to a cross-country trip, had no idea if I needed permits or what roads were safe to ride on or what roads a bicyclist could be on. So I took the easy way out. Since the Race Across America had already done this route numerous times, I just piggybacked onto that and contacted the RAM director to make sure he was okay with me doing something like that.
Huh. That makes sense.
Since I was kind of going off, I went off a couple weeks before RAM, but I knew they were going to catch me across the country.
Oh, so they started it after you?
Yeah.
Did they catch you?
Yeah. The RAM it's a special breed of person.
Uh-huh.
They basically have to ride, I'm guessing, 300 miles a day.
Wow.
With 2 to 4 hours of sleep for 8 days. And that's a little...
8 days instead of 30.
It's a different kind of
torture.
I would say that because, doing over 100 miles a day for a month is another kind of effort.
Uh-huh.
Definitely not as hard, but it's definitely an effort.
What did you witness a kickoff when you started?
No, basically it was just a mom and pop thing. I got the sponsors, RV America, all these other sponsors, Tech and Goo2O, and New Belgium Brewery. I got all these people together and they donated their resources and stuff. The company I work with, CoBank, donated a large sum of money and was able to, with a significant discount from RV America, get an RV. And me and a buddy left Colorado, drove the URV to California, and the next morning I started on my ride.
Jeez.
And my buddy followed behind me in an RV at 16 to 20 miles an hour. And we did that until we got to Mexican Hat, Utah. And then a buddy took my car and drove it down there. And the guy that went out there swapped out, took my car back to Denver, and that buddy went with me to Wichita. And then the other person drove my car to Wichita, and they swapped out. And then we went to Ohio, Toledo, where I picked up my lovely wife, and she swapped out with the other driver, and my wife did the last weeks with me.
Wow.
So it was just and I had donated Delta had donated an airline ticket to get my wife out.
Wow.
So
That's neat.
it was a lot of work.
So when you were leaving Oceanside, and I think, what did you say, you did like 100 miles on the first day?
Yeah.
What were the thoughts going on in your head as you're rolling out and
Well, I had
starting the journey?
had some really good advice from my coach. He was like, look, you're coming from Colorado to California, so there's a significant drop in altitude of 5,000 plus feet. And he goes, you're going to feel like a rock star when you get there, and the adrenaline of finally getting this thing started, you're probably going to start out too fast. and don't get caught up in that. He said ride a couple gears lower than what you think you need to be so that you don't burn yourself out. And that advice right there is worth its weight in gold, especially for people coming from other places to ride here in Colorado. You just take it easy when you first get to your location.
So it sounds like your focus was primarily on disciplining yourself to work through the event.
Plus,
from day one.
The ride wasn't about high speed miles. It was just about getting it done. So I did a lot of base miles and a few intervals, but a lot of base miles. I would probably, if I do it again, I would have done more intervals.
To get ready for the ride?
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to sprint up to this guy.
If you want to slow down.
You can ignore the cadence change. Keep your cadence where you're comfortable. I think he needed a screwdriver. But the man was on a mission. He didn't want to stop for nothing. It's all right. See, we can go faster if we wanted to. Huh? So, you obviously did train extensively for that 3,000 miles.
Yeah, I did almost 12,000 miles that year.
Wow. So was that the focus of your training? Miles, distance, time?
Yeah, I started off increasing it because I figured I'd need to do 100 miles a day. So I started off doing 30 a day and bumping that up. And I was riding in the morning, at lunch, and at night. And I just kept knocking that out to where I was finally doing almost 90 miles a day.
But you split it up over multiple rides or all at one shot?
I was just trying to do close to 90 a day.
However you could get it.
Yeah. And I'm talking to people now, it probably wasn't the best way, but it managed to work out for me. And I had well enough time to train. I had planned it out how many miles a day I needed to be hitting by a certain time, and that's basically what I did. Speaking of climbing, I probably would have done more climbing, but that year was pretty bad for outside riding here in Colorado. I wasn't able to get a ton of
feet in.
Yeah, elevation wise.
Did you find that impacted the ride?
I don't think it impacted the ride, but it would have made certain parts of it nicer. And I don't think, by the time I got to the East Coast, I was pretty mentally, physically, and drained.
Yeah.
And so worried about stumbling before the finish line that I was really focused on a lot of different things.
What was the most significant climb on their ride?
I'd say the roughest climb was Wolf Creek Pass, as far as a sustained long climb.
That's just what, north of Denver?
No, it's just east of Durango.
Oh, okay.
And it's a pretty significant climb. I'd say as far as the roughest part of the ride was definitely Pennsylvania. And I know I've mentioned that to you many times before, and a lot of people across the country have asked me what was the worst part of that ride, and Pennsylvania always comes up. And Pennsylvania was just bad because it's just roller after roller after roller. It's non-stop. And it was 2 days of 200 plus miles of just roller after roller. And you couldn't get enough momentum to get you up them. And it was just, and it was also 100 degrees.
Wow.
With high humidity, and he would ride across pockets of tar that would pop and blow hot water on your legs, and it was just, it was just tough to get through it. It wasn't really physically a problem, it was just mentally was just a bombardment. You know, a new hill every 2, 3, 5 minutes.
Yeah. We see a lot of those rollers out here too, but probably not to the same extent.
And the problem with roads in Pennsylvania, a lot of them are built on old cattle trails, so
oh man,
they just meander and climb, and yeah. Missouri had a difficult day there with some climbs that I wasn't anticipating, but other than that, it was pretty good.
Wow. So after your first 100 miles, how'd you feel?
Actually, I hate to say this, but I felt like a rock star all the way across the country. I mean, evidently the training I did paid off, because it wasn't bad. I mean, granted, I had saddle sores the size of silver dollars on the backside and some other stuff like that, but keep them clean and keep going. I mean, that was the worst part of it. The heat was, I mean, I rode, just 27 days or 28 days, and I never really rode in the rain all the way across the country, which is phenomenal. But I did have pretty much 100-degree days all the way across the state. Arizona was terrifically difficult because got a couple of 116-degree days.
Yeah.
And trying to ride and exercise in that kind of heat is a challenge in itself. And like I said, that whole winter I was stuck inside in climate-controlled basement and wasn't used to the heat. But it all, you know, you adapt. You take a Camelback and you put water in it, freeze it, and you put it on your back and ride with that on your back to keep you cool. And you start earlier in the morning and just take advantage of the tools you have. And like I said, my goal was just to make it across the country, not in a timed event. So just keep it steady and easy, and don't burn too many matches. Just kind of like if you're a new person starting off on your first century, you got 100 miles to go. Don't drill the first 20 because you got the next 80 to go. So
yeah, on the second climb, the one after this, the next pass, I was with a group and they were just wanting to keep that intensity up, and then on the climb up, just hammered at it. And you'll hear me yelling, only 50 more miles. But those guys are actually pretty strong. I see a lot of people starting off a distance event way too hard. The anxiety and the adrenaline is coursing through, and you want to feel good about yourself and get past people, and you don't want people to pass you. So it's a mental game.
Yeah, it's all about, I mean, it's like anything in your life. It's all about moderation, and it's just like a time trial event. If you blast the first couple minutes of it, you're not going to do very well. So stay within your limit. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's good to push yourself. But
so on this climb here, I mean, there's a method to the madness. You know, we're trying to keep our heart rate below 90%. I don't want to let anything go into the red zone. And I'm trying to lay off people passing like these guys, and even though the temptation was there, so I could easily sustain a 92 to 95% up the hill and probably stay on a couple of these wheels. But my understanding, when you're climbing a mountain, that you're trying to sustain a heart rate about 8 to 10% less than you would normally sustain when you're working hard on, say, a flat. Do you have any insight on that? Or
that's exactly right. I mean, below that red line zone, you could probably hold that for a long period of time. You pop up into those red zone, you're not really meant to spend a truckload of time up there, and your body's just going to tell you, you will stop, you will slow down, and you're much better off to just maintain a consistent effort, especially for someone who's new. Up, just.
Was this something you were focusing on during your bigger climbs when you were on your ride across America?
You know, you've probably been doing this long enough, but it got to a point that I was so kind of overtrained that I couldn't bust my heart rate above 140 if I tried, but I could keep it there forever. And I think I managed 17, 18 miles across the country, but that was just, lock it in and stay there. Just basically did zone 1, 2s across the country.
Wow.
And just stayed there. Because like I've reiterated numerous times, the goal was just to get from point A to point B.
I remember when you and I were at Cherry Creek and we were doing intervals, and you had a couple of friends that were doing a recovery ride, and we'd go like 10 to 12 second sprint,
yep.
2 minute recovery,
yep.
And
it doesn't sound like a lot, but
well, we were hitting 35 miles an hour on the sprint, and the guys we were with would fade way behind us, and then we'd slow down, recover our heart rate to around 80, maybe 75,
and they'd catch right back up,
and they'd pass.
Yep.
And these guys were not working hard at all. And I try to use this mantra of riding, maintaining an aerobic heart rate when you're doing longer distances where you can. And usually our changes in heart rate are dependent on how steep the hill is and how much we want to ride with other people. So those changes in effort when we go into the red zone is usually a direct result of getting on a wheel and trying to hold it.
Yep. It's very difficult to ride at someone else's pace, especially climbing.
Oh, especially climbing. I think some of the guys who passed us here, when we get to the top of this thing, we actually reel back in, and we're still not working really hard. But I guess our effort is, our energy is like a bag of marbles, and every time you spend it, you know, you're losing a marble, and you're not going to get it back. And when you run out, you're done.
Yep.
So in the first week of your ride, or the week and a half or so, you covered ground from California to Colorado.
Yep.
What did, during that stretch, what experiences did you find most memorable? A little steeper here. You collect your thoughts. A little steeper. 9 out of 10. Cadence has dropped to right around 60. Let's really work on keeping the legs going around. I remember when I did this ride first time, this is about the point where I wanted to get off the bike and stop. So
just keep pedaling.
Just keep pedaling, and you'll be surprised
where you end up.
Yep.
I would say the sunrises and the sunsets.
Oh, yeah.
Probably the most memorable in the desert. Colorado. The heat, because I swear,
have a goo.
Arizona was trying to kill me. And I think the biggest thing, as I can say with any kind of endurance thing, and like you've reiterated a few times, you got to take the fuel in. I managed after a month of riding to only lose 3 pounds. So the key is, and I was taking in close to 10,000 calories a day, but you got to take the fuel in. And if you get behind, as you know, and bonking on a ride because you haven't been eating and drinking is not a very fun experience.
We've all been there. You meet any people on your first day or first week? You know, people who...
I met people here and there, and they were really nice and supportive. Can't really call any names off the top of my head, but going through some of the Indian reservations was quite memorable.
Really? Why is that?
The living conditions are kind of bad, and I have a political view on that, but it's probably not right for this kind of workout, but it was kind of a shame, though.
Yeah. Well, I remember just driving through New Mexico, Arizona. There's a lot of shanties here in the United States. It's just something I wasn't really expecting to see the first time through.
Like another on my bandwagon, but a lot of the U.S. is missing a lot of rural America now. All these little main street shops have all had to close up because bigger businesses have come in and can do things much more cost efficiently. And I think America's losing a lot of rural America, and those sections of the country are some of the most patriotic people towards our country. It's amazing.
Go ahead. I can bleep all this out later.
So,
I'm kidding. Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. Seems like I'd imagine a lot of the charm from riding your bike in and out of these smaller communities were probably the communities themselves, not the open roads or cities that you might have gone through.
well, you'd see the red, white, and blue banning all over the houses and street signs, and it was just kind of refreshing.
Yeah.
And that kind of Mayberry feeling that you only get in a small town.
You were telling me your ride through Kansas actually surprised you. Why was that?
You know, I had some, I don't know, some preconceived of ideas of how
People would behave
yeah,
to a cyclist, spandex and shaved legs.
exactly, which is not fair. But Kansas was by far one of the friendliest places. The people were above and beyond nice. Didn't have any close calls with cars and friendly, and would see the RV with the signs and or cared earnestly about what you were doing and wanted to find out about it. And to ride through Kansas, especially the southern part, which I've never been through, in the spring where it's all green, is pretty amazing. And those prairie lands all being green is an awesome sight. And then you'd watch the wind blow and make patterns in all that grass. Like one of my most memorable days was going through Kansas, and I hit the wind the day before. Been nasty winds of gusts up to 40 miles an hour, possibly 50. They'd blown the tarp off the top of the RV.
Wow.
I literally had to ride at a 45-degree angle to keep from getting blown over. And the next day, the wind shifted and the road shifted. And I'm not kidding you, for 6 hours, I averaged like 27, 28 miles an hour and never got my heart rate above 130.
Wow.
And just screamed. I mean, normally the bad part of that is you have to turn around and ride back into it, but I got lucky and just got to take that flight path all the way.
You got into the jet stream.
Yep. Which was an awesome experience that I'll never forget. Because to be able to ride at that speed without doing any work. I think there's a picture of me with my arms out like an airplane flying down the road. It was just amazing.
Put a sail on your bike.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Oh, we're getting up there. We're at 2,700 meters, 8,800 feet. The top of this climb is around 9,500 feet. Which will actually find the top when after it levels out a little bit. We'll be going up and down, and then we'll have a couple little bumps in the road, and that last bump takes us to our highest elevation. I think it starts leveling at about 9,300 feet. Here's the group I was telling you about. I'll cut back up to. We're just
like you can see, there's different climbing styles.
Yeah,
she's spinning at a lot quicker cadence, and
yep,
he's doing a lot of slow cadence. It's all, there's no right way or wrong way, just as long as you get up the hill.
I think the guy on the left, actually, when we were overhearing this conversation on the third disc, he's a Olympic ski instructor. That's pretty cool. Bobby. Yeah, Google Bobby, Olympic ski instructor. I don't know. So the caravan, you and your RV, can you kind of describe what, set up a shot of the road. If we were doing a movie while you're pedaling along, what would you see?
As far as the RV?
You know, your entourage and,
well, the driver for the week was usually, I don't know, 10 to 15 feet off my bumper, off my rear wheel. That way, so when people passed us, they didn't all of a sudden go, oh, no cyclist was there, and have to swerve in and cut me off. So we try to keep the RV as close as possible to me so that I didn't have to worry about cars swinging around us and hitting us. And basically, I think the people that had the hardest time were the people who had to follow behind me. I think I had the easy part, but to follow behind me in an RV for 5, 6, 7 hours a day at 20 or below
miles per hour
without killing me or running me over.
You just hope they don't get too sleepy, huh?
Yeah. And to do that day in and day out for 7 days was a lot of work.
Was there any signage on the RV which explained the event you were doing?
We had a sign on the back.
Move your mic down. Yeah.
That stated what we were doing. If I had to do it over again, I'd probably made that a little bit more descriptive. But I had the states labeled, and every time I went through a state, I crossed it out. And
I saw you had pictures at the state lines.
Yep.
Oh, we're almost up to the top of this tougher climb, or the longer. You can see the ridge of the summit in front of us. First it gets a little steeper. Did you have any confrontations with drivers or law enforcement? Or?
No confrontations with the law, but people yelling, throwing stuff. Just your typical experiences you get from riding on the road.
Yep.
There's bad drivers just like there's bad cyclists, so.
Yep.
At this stage in the game, we've been working almost an hour in zone 4. You're losing a lot of water. It affects the way you perform and your thought processes. You become less strategic, a lot more philosophical. It's like getting drunk. I love you, man. We got a guy right in front of us. You can see him really mashing. I can't imagine that his legs will be real happy when he gets up. But so when you're climbing, what are your thoughts about being in the saddle and coming out of the saddle?
You lose a lot of energy and a lot of power coming out of the saddle. It seems like you're going to just the opposite, but it's actually counterproductive. And you're much better, in my opinion, to stay seated and climb. It's much more efficient.
Yeah. Working a bigger group of muscles in the saddle. And when you're coming out of the saddle, you're focusing on a smaller group, but you're also taxing your heart. You're involving your core, your abdominals, your strength, your back, arms, shoulders. And so your heart rate just shoots up, even though maybe it gives your legs a momentary break. Sound about right?
Sounds spot on to me.
Have a goo.
I'm good.
If you haven't already figured out, we're actually riding right along with you. The efforts you're experiencing, we're experiencing. We're not sitting in a lazy boy drinking a beer and narrating the video. I don't think a lot of people don't realize how much work it is to do these narratives. Trying to think on your toes and pedal and get your heart rate up and follow all the tools on the dash and try and sound like you're educated. So since we're almost up, let's briefly, what would you consider to be the 3 most important training aspects to get up a big hill?
1, to climb.
To actually do it.
Climb, 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 climb. 2, find a rhythm and stay with it. And to breathe. Not tense up. Try to stay as relaxed from the waist up as you possibly can. Don't grimace. Don't squint your face.
Yeah.
Try to keep everything relaxed. Taking your fluids, like the video is saying. And just get in your rhythm and climb.
Well, I think those are good strategies for when you're actually climbing. I guess what my question is I mean, a lot of times our training diverts a little bit from the actual event.
of climbing. I mean, when you're actually doing the ride, there are certain steps that you've taken to get to this stage. And I guess what I want to know is, in your opinion, what are the 3 most important training steps? Be it, saddle time, base miles, diet, nutrition, stuff like that.
Well,
Technique.
it's kind of a loaded question. A lot of your training depends on what kind of riding you're going to do. I would say your best ones are A, get the saddle time, but 2, just as equally as important, people tend to overtrain. I think very few people ever undertrain for stuff. Get your rest days in and use them.
Yep.
Because that's when your body recovers. Sleep, that'll get your body to repair. And 2, depending on what you want to do, you're going to have to focus your training on it. And climbing, I would say, if you're going to do a big ride with a bunch of climbing, then you should probably climb once or twice a week. And then get a couple days into recovery. And then maybe have a day worth of intervals. But there's different schools of thought on back-to-back hard days, but try to keep it hard day, rest day, hard day, rest day, as best you can, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And occasionally throw in some back-to-back hard days, but for training, you want to kind of give yourself that recovery.
Yeah, especially if you're race pace training intervals.
Because in my opinion, the worst thing you can do is overtrain and not get your rest and miss your event.
On this ride, I got about 2 hours sleep last night, and it definitely hurt. But anytime I go to an event like this, there's an amount of anxiety, makes it hard to sleep, and excitement, and then on top of that, you're trying to prepare the gear to do a successful video shoot.
Yep.
And so that was more anxiety. If it's your very first ride, very first century, you'll probably have a very restless night.
Yep.
Pack some meds. Lots of Tylenol for the ride.
And I would say too, if you're coming from out of state, the altitude is a big factor.
Absolutely. Well, there's actually unlike what we're experiencing now, where we're not changing our elevation. I mean, this ride here, we've just gone up 3,000 feet, and there's a big difference in the way your body responds at altitude. Here we're coming down, so let's shift a small ring up front, get the cadence up as we begin a little descent here. And we can soft pedal here. We're going to just coast it out. You can coast, let your heart rate come down just a little bit. You can see where the next climb starts. Or soft pedal if your heart rate starts dropping below the recommended. Just soft pedal. When we're controlling a bike, the heart rate goes down slower than when we're on our trainer, so count for that. Your heart rate will fall faster. This is beautiful up here. Have you been up Rabbit Ears?
I think I have, but it's been a while.
There's our friend again. We play cat and mouse for a little while. Keeping the...
I will throw in some sense too, though, if you're on a big ride like this. Your best bet is to try to keep soft pedaling at least, and do as little coasting as you can, because if you let that muscles sit,
freeze up.
your next climb is probably going to be a little less enjoyable than what you want it to be.
Yep. A lot less. And we're going to slowly work our way back onto a little grade here. Cadence is going to be a little higher than before, so we can keep them up at around 80 to 90. And try and sustain that cadence as we're shifting through higher gears, as the hill starts getting a little steeper. And let the heart rate just come right up all by itself. And if you find yourself working too hard, your heart rate going a little too high, just slow down your cadence.
Drop a few gears.
Or drop a few gears, whatever it takes. There's really two rides, or two workouts when you're using the video. You have the resistance workout where you ignore the cadence and just do whatever cadence you can manage while you're maintaining that heart rate. And the other workout is to ignore the gear ratio and just try and go off the cadence and use whatever gear that you need to use to sustain the heart rate. Because everybody's bikes are different, everybody's trainer's different, and the resistances are kind of all over the place, so it's really hard to make a one-for-all training tool that will work for everybody. So you got to play it by ear, experiment, you know, and you can even switch back and forth between resistance and cadence. You just want the ride to feel real, feel natural, and you should feel like you just climbed 3,000 feet. And here we got a little hill coming up. Keep the cadence up nice and high, and then as we approach the hill, just slowly add some resistance as our speed slows down. And you can even hear the shifting in the video and use that as your indicator for how steep the hill is getting. And big ring up front. This is a steeper hill. Let the cadence slowly drop down to about what we had before. So it's a real similar climb to the last one, or to the big one. And we see the carrot right in front of us. We're trying not to use this as an incentive. Just keep the heart rate under control. We'll be topping this hill off at about 88% of max. So let the heart rate gradually get back into that zone.
Going downhill, this is so disappointing.
I'm complaining about the hill in the video. Like yourself, hill climbing is not my best event.
Well, climbing's a lot about pain and how much you're willing to endure.
You see it's a little steeper. Guys out of the saddle, getting out. We're gonna stay in and just grind our way over the top. Watching that cadence, right about 70. It's pretty steep. And we're fishing for the top here. You can see it's right around the corner. I think that's one of the most demoralizing things, or just seeing that top. Not demoralizing, just, oh man, it's coming up so slow. And you want to sprint for it, but you know you're not supposed to.
Just keep pedaling. My best advice.
The hill is leveling out here just a little bit, so we can drop into the little ring, keep a little resistance on. Let our cadence shoot up to about 75, 80.
I'd say too, you notice that guy just took his hand and shook it.
Yeah.
It's good to move your body position around on the bike so things don't go to sleep, and you keep the blood flowing, and get up and position yourself a little bit on your seat.
Stretch it out every once in a while. A lot of young climbers, or I'd say people who, and even advanced climbers or experienced climbers, cramp a lot on the climbs. What might your recommendations be to prevent cramping?
Fluid intake. Keep the calories coming in. And know your limit.
Flattening out here. Cadence is up, increasing. At this stage, neutral gear, about 4 out of 10, should feel like a soft pedal. But you're still working, still keeping our heart rate in the anaerobic zone. It should be slowly dropping as we are resting a little bit on the way down here. I think this was actually probably the toughest part for me, is after that big climb, the rollers and the brakes, and then all of a sudden another hill. Oh, mother. And actually right about here, we've got a pretty good little crosswind. Maybe here is coming up. Well, I think, yeah, fluid intake and the right fluids to bring in are important for climbing, or to prevent cramping, because when we're actually sweating and we're losing all of the water that we're bringing in, but we're also losing sweat and salt, and so our electrolytes become imbalanced. Our muscles can't absorb the
fluids that we're taking in, as long as we don't replenish the electrolytes. You mentioned eat or food, and that again, those goo packs or power drinks help a lot with that.
Yes, they do.
Big ring up front. And I think that's a lot of hear me? I think so. Sounds like my mic is dying. Check.
I would say also the day before a ride, make sure you eat appropriately. During a ride like this, if it's a fun ride, you usually should have a break station.
Yeah, which is coming right up.
And take advantage of that and eat the bananas and whatever else is there. Because, like you said, you can drink water all day long, but you're pumping out electrolytes, potassium, sodium, and all the stuff your body needs, and you're not putting it back in. It's not going to function so well.
Nope.
But I would say, as a rule of thumb, I would think, in the summertime, if you're on a century, I would say try at least when I took the trip across the country, I was trying to do at least 2 20-ounce bottles an hour. And I was doing at least one kind of gel or goose shot an hour. And then I had a decent breakfast, a decent lunch, and a decent dinner.
This is a steep climb. Let's do out of the saddle. I don't know if you can hear me okay.
Yeah, I'm hearing you more.
Count it or call it out because I don't know if my mic is.
I'm hearing you more just from talking instead of in my ears.
Out of the saddle. All the way to the top of the hill. Test.
That's better.
Backup mic.
That's better.
You never know what's going to happen when you're doing this stuff live, including the video. Getting a crash or something. Okay, the hill is starting to level out here, so we can take off some resistance. We're almost there. And this part goes pretty fast just because the speeds are up a little bit. Beginning to flatten out here, we can take off some resistance. Small ring up front. Got a little break here coming up. Start going down the hill. Just soft pedal down and get ready for the next one.
So what pass did you go over on coming through Colorado on your tour?
I went through Wolf Creek Pass, La Vida Pass, I think that's what that's called, La Vida.
That was all through southern Colorado, or?
This was all through southern Colorado. There's another pass. I did 3 mountain passes in one day. It was just about 150 miles as I rode from, I can't remember where, into Trinidad. Caruchu Pass was the other one. And if you ever get a chance to go down there and ride those passes in Colorado, they're definitely extremely beautiful. Different parts of Colorado, definitely, you can tell where you're at by the way the mountains are. They're definitely different in each part of the state.
Yep.
But I came up through Four Corners, Durango.
And so it sounds like you try to avoid the really big mountain passes, or like Loveland, or
No, the Wolf Creek and La Vida and Caruchu Pass are both, I would say, pretty decent mountain passes.
what was the summit elevation?
I don't remember what they were off the top of my head. I have to go back and research that. But they were definitely some decent passes. It's just the southern part of the states where the route went through. I have done most of those. I have done the triple a few times. The triple bypass. Every year I try to climb Mount Evans at least once. If I'm really crazy, 2 or 3 times.
Up to 14,000?
Yeah. That's definitely that climb is definitely one of those climbs that it's good until you get to Summit Lake, and I think Summit Lake you're about 11 or 12,000 feet.
11, yeah.
And then you're in 11 to 14,000 feet range. Your body ceases to do things correctly at that point in time. And you've already also, normally, by the time you reach that point, you've been climbing at least an hour and 45 minutes, 2 hours.
Starting at what, 8,000 feet?
Yeah, starting at Idaho Springs.
Idaho Springs.
So that climb is definitely an enjoyable climb.
That was a different adjective for an expletive, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, at 10,000 feet, my body was noticing that even though I was working very easily, it felt like I was soft pedaling. But my heart was ready to burst out of my chest. And I didn't even feel like I was breathing that hard, but it just seems to, your body doesn't seem to know what to do with the difference in pressure.
Plus, once you've already expended a certain amount of energy, your heart rate's not going to drop back down as low as it was before because you're still working things. Hey, you burned the amount of calories.
Well, I was feeling it when I was going up Loveland Pass. Right before I hit the Loveland ski area, the foot of it.
Yep.
And that's when my body was starting to kind of shut down. And then they had the rest station right at the foot, right at the ski resort. And you could see the road climbing up, Highway 6, climbing up to 12,000 feet. And That was just horrible.
Yeah, look out!
Looking at it.
Look out's another climb that's a difficult climb.
Lookout Mountain.
And not Lookout, the Loveland.
Okay, right.
Loveland Pass is not one of my favorite climbs either.
Well, there's a.
I have a love-hate relationship with climbs. I love to hate them.
Yeah, when you have a ride that size with that many people, and I think it draws about 3,000 people.
Yeah.
I think this right here, we had about 500. But this right here really draws a lot of experienced riders, and I was surprised at the caliber of cyclists. You know, there's a lot of strong guys and women, and but with like the triple, with 3,000 people, you get all shapes and sizes.
Yep.
And riding mountain bikes and comfort bikes and
Schwinn Stingrays with banana seats and
recumbents, and I just remember
3-speed stick shifts.
I remember going up over Loveland ski area and starting to climb, and you know, there was just like every 50 feet, 25 feet, somebody was off the side of the road laying down with their bike. A lot of them were just in tears, seriously crying because they were abandoning the ride right there. And I think a lot of that has to do with just what's going on in your head. So, you know, it feels like you can't do it, but you know, you just keep getting one leg over the other, and one crank after another.
And sooner or later you'll be over the top.
Yeah. So that's our motivational, inspirational speech for the day.
Well, I can't tell you how many times I've been on a climb until, you know, the little man inside your head's going, just turn around. Just stop. No one's going to know. Just turn around and stop. But you're not going to get anything out of turning around and stopping, and you'll know that you didn't do it, and it'll be over soon enough. Ignore the little man or woman in your head.
Well, this is a. Go ahead.
Or alien, whoever that might be, telling you to stop.
Yeah, sometimes it's not you. It's somebody else. It's your father from when you were 7 years old. You can't do it. Well, this is pretty much the end of the ride. We're at the summit here, and just a nice flat chute to the rest stop. I thank you guys for joining Tim, and I really thank Tim for joining us. And maybe he'll show up for the next ride. Stage 2 will be descending down to the second stop. It's a short 45-minute stage, but it's a great interval workout. A lot of tough little sprint climbs. It's fun, it's fast. We get a few more people we get to ride with, and we get to alternate between pulling up front and drafting in the back. So it's actually a really fun little 18-mile stretch that we crank out in 45 minutes. So it's pretty quick.
It's good. Well, thank you for having me along.
Absolutely. So let's just soft pedal, and well, if you're ending the ride here, which I know most of you will be, soft pedal, and let's bring our heart rate down to the low 70s. We don't need to cover all the attacks or things here. We want to try to recover slowly so we can get off the bike and walk normal. But if you're going to keep riding and you're going to throw in the second disc, 45 minutes, and keep the heart rate up, don't let yourself cool down too much. There'll be some nice high efforts on the next disc, and you want to cover them without feeling too cold. And shift yourself into a nice easy recovery gear. Let's just keep the legs turning easy. get the heart rate down. Had a great time riding with you, and I look forward to seeing you on the next disc.
No problem. Thanks for having me along.
All right. This is BitBop signing out.